Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to our talk. Today, the topic is breaking the fifth. And I'm going to do something I don't usually do, and I'm going to read the essay and then talk about it a little bit. So here we go. There's a running joke in Los Angeles that everything is 20 minutes away from wherever you are currently. It's the time of day that determines how long it will take you to get there. Could be 3 hours if you're leaving Santa Monica at rush hour on a Friday. This 20-minute rule applies to everywhere except the places it doesn't apply to at all because they are legitimately farther away than that. I had to go to a couple of those places Sunday. I taught the one public yoga class I teach every week, Sundays from 10:30 a.m. to 12 noon. It's at a little studio in Santa Monica, about 10 minutes from my house. My daughter had to be down in Manhattan Beach at 1 p.m. for a presentation she was giving. She's part of this very cool organization called SOAR, Eco Innovation Academy. They connect high school students with local companies that want to pursue more sustainable ways of doing business. The kids tour participating companies, are assigned to one, and split into groups. They work with a mentor to identify an area where the company can improve. Could be cutting single-use plastics from the cafeteria or organizing carpools to and from work. And they come up with ideas. Whether the companies take the advice is up to them, of course, but the kids suggest short and long-term plans, a budget, marketing if needed, app or website mock-ups, social media campaigns, first-rate stuff. My daughter has been working with her group for months, and Sunday was the day they presented their solutions to the company partners, the SOAR organizers, and other participants, and any parents in attendance. I did not want her to be late. I forgot to mention it was LA Marathon Sunday, which means traffic was about 90 gajillion times worse than normal. And it was sunny and beautiful, so multiply that times 8. I texted my daughter from the parking lot of the yoga studio, letting her know I was jumping in the car and would slow down in front of our house so she could get a running start and hurl herself through the open passenger window as I passed by. Kidding. We made it. We were 11 minutes late, but it was fine. They served lunch first. The presentations happened after. It was all very professional. There were tables set up and a caterer. There was music, a big screen, good sound system, and a PowerPoint presentation that was glitch-free. The kids were very prepared. It made me feel hopeful to see how many high school students have been devoting their time to this kind of work and how many companies recognize sustainability matters. You start to worry when the POTUS thinks drill, baby, drill is a phrase to be proud of. Leaving the Paris Accord is a good idea, and regulations are for losers. The presentation ended at 3 p.m. I was really proud of my kid. So proud, I was willing to drive her to the Grove for a date at 6 p.m. If you're doing the math, this makes me a fantastic mom or absolutely insane. Let's go with option 1. I guess you need to understand that Manhattan Beach is 13 miles south of our house, and the most direct and really only route is the 405. Also, that the 405 is almost always bad with traffic. It's like a law of not nature. So I was already 26 miles in by the time we got back from Manhattan Beach. The Grove, on the other hand, is 10 and a half miles northeast of our house, and you take the 10 freeway, called the 10. I added freeway so you'd know if you didn't. So basically, I got to sit down and answer emails for about 45 minutes at home before it was time to head out again. Thing is, my firstborn is up at college, and I know how fast this goes. My second will be there before I know it. I love spending time with my kids. I don't always love driving all over Los Angeles, but what happened Sunday is unusual. So out the door we went. I hadn't really thought about what I was going to do when we got to the Grove, though. Obviously, I am way too cool to third wheel it on my 15-year-old's date, so at the last second, I decided to take my laptop. I wasn't going to drive back and forth twice, and I'm not a shopper. The Grove is an outdoor mall. That's probably a detail I should have shared 2 paragraphs ago, but who's counting? There are tons of stores and restaurants, a Barnes & Noble, would have gone there if I couldn't write, and a movie theater. I didn't hold out much hope of getting anything done with my laptop. You may remember from last week's essay, I am not someone who can write in a coffee shop, but I brought it. We talked all the way there. My daughter is one of my favorite people. She's just really cool and smart and funny. The traffic was better than I anticipated. No one sane drives on Marathon Sunday in Los Angeles because there are more street closures than divorced 50-year-old men dating women half their age, but whatever. Our agreement was we'd try, and if it was impossible, she'd text this boy and let him know it wasn't going to happen. His family lives closer to the Grove, so they could leave later and would wait to hear. Maybe because no one but me would make this drive, no one was driving. We made really good time until I got off at Fairfax and headed north. Even then, it wasn't terrible, but I realized I felt a little depressed being there. I can't remember the last time I was up that way, but it's been a while. Fairfax Avenue is the north-south main road I took almost every day when I first moved to Los Angeles in 2001. It was my route to the on-ramp onto the 10 every morning when I was heading to practice and teach all day, and my exit off the 10 every night when I was heading back to my little bungalow on Carmona Avenue. I moved to LA with my dog Bogey and a guy. I've written about him before. We weren't supposed to move across the country together. It was supposed to be a fun summer fling. Things don't always go the way they're supposed to go. You might have noticed this. I don't think I'm a fling kind of gal either. So we ended up moving here together, and it ended up being really painful. Like stab yourself in the heart with a hot flaming poker painful. Or, I don't know, have all of your worst fears play out in front of you painful. Along with a number of other things you never imagined because they never occurred to you as things that might happen because you never read, saw, or heard of any of the dark shit that ended up happening. Not in any books you'd read or movies you'd seen or conversations you'd ever had with anyone, anywhere. I don't want to go into a lot of details right now. Sorry. He just had a lot of demons and he hid them. I mean, a lot of you already know the Whole Foods cheese story. That turned out to be the tip of the Jarlsberg. I came to understand I'd been lied to on some very deep, dark levels in a way that makes you wonder if you can trust yourself at all or if you should just take your dog and go off-grid for the rest of your life. It made me really sad for someone I had loved deeply and concerned enough about my own ability to walk past red flags that I didn't date at all for a year and a half. I just unsubscribed from that shit so I could clear my head. But sometimes a place lives in your bones, and driving the streets where you drove when you were hurting like that, even decades later, calls that younger version of you to the surface. So there she was with me suddenly, in the driver's seat of my car, my daughter in the passenger seat next to us. It made my heart ache. I've been in that position a few times in my life. Maybe you have too, maybe not. That place when you're in a relationship with someone you love, but they're leaving you no choice at all but to end it. If you don't end it, you'll die. Maybe not literally, maybe just your soul will be crushed and all the light you have will be extinguished so that you're just a shell of yourself. Just the tiniest, weakest version of you, hardly recognizable, and certainly not someone you can like or respect. Or maybe staying will kill you literally. It feels like it will. It is a razor's edge at that point. You're just bleeding out slowly, and on either side there's pain. So you choose between the pain that will poison you or the pain that will free you, even though the freedom breaks your fucking heart. Anyway, a weird thing happened when we got to the Grove. My daughter went off to meet her friend, and I walked around for a while to see if I could find a place to write. It became clear that the only possibility was Starbucks. Everywhere else was packed and loud. So I went in and ordered a matcha latte and sat down to see if there was any chance I could write in a setting that doesn't usually work for me. Writing has been going well the last week. I don't even want to say that because I'll probably screw it up. But I was mid-chapter and I just picked up where I'd left off and I wrote for a little over an hour with a person 2 seats to my left and a truly terrible playlist pumping through the speakers. I even made myself cry. Then they announced they were closing, so I went to my car and texted my daughter to let her know that's where I'd be. I sat there in the parking lot looking at Dupar's and thinking about some of the places that aren't there anymore. I used to go to the Grove with the guy I moved out here with. We'd go on Saturday nights when they had karaoke. One thing about him, he could sing. He would bring the house down. Blonde, blue-eyed guy, and you'd never think it looking at him. But he'd open his mouth and he could belt out just about anything. The first time I saw him do it, my mouth fell open. He didn't warn me. We just went to this place in New York and he got up and sang Superstition, which is not a song you should sing unless you're Stevie Wonder or this guy. People were on their feet screaming. The highs with him were fun, but the lows were devastating. There were things I tolerated pretty early on that felt strange and made me uncomfortable. Friendships he had with people who were not friendly to me, a need to be adored by everyone in the room that sucked the oxygen out of every place we'd go and left me feeling lightheaded and not enough. There were questions I didn't ask because I didn't want to overstep. There were times I felt hurt and confused, but I didn't have the language to start those conversations yet. I didn't know I was being tested. I didn't realize he was seeing how far he could push the envelope, how much I would wrestle with myself to avoid seeming needy or insecure or, God forbid, jealous. I was in my late 20s, still trying to get that A+ and be perfect. You need someone to accept you as you are without trying to change you because you've never had that before? I'm your girl. I can do it. It didn't occur to me then it was a form of manipulation, a challenge in advance. No one has ever let me be me. You probably won't either. A test to see how far he could go before I'd break. Turns out I can take a lot of pain. I realized while I was sitting in my car in the parking lot, this is the country right now. We're being tested and we're failing so badly. We're tolerating things we should be fighting loudly and passionately. Half of us are failing anyway. The people who voted for this think they're getting what they want, and maybe they are right now. Maybe they are so glad to see 240 alleged gang members being shipped to El Salvador, handcuffed and pushed forward by their heads. They don't even care they were denied due process. It's a slippery slope, and exactly what this administration and this president is hoping for. If he can get his supporters to give him the red hat salute denying due process to some people, he's got himself a precedent. Alleged was the important word above, by the way. Anyone can say anything. That's called an accusation. I can say Mark Zuckerberg likes to watch reruns of Pee Wee Herman, paint his nipples with maple syrup, and have tiny mice lick them clean. But without proof, that's just an accusation. If I'm the president of my own country and I've decided that's illegal, and it would be if I were the president of my own country because mice deserve better, shouldn't Mark get his day in court? Shouldn't I have to show evidence of his abuse of mice before he's sent to a mega prison in El Salvador, packed into a tiny cell like a mouse himself, only to see the light of day for 30 minutes every 24 hours and subjected to God knows how many other human rights violations? You might not like Mark. I don't like him either, but he's a person, right? I'll still defend his right to have due process whether I like him or not. When you talk to the president's supporters, it doesn't matter to them if evidence was presented that proved every one of these Venezuelan men was part of Tren de Aragua. They don't care, and they don't care that other Venezuelans in our country who have been here legally for years are now afraid they may be accused of being part of this gang and deported without due process. That's the cost of being from somewhere else, sorry. We have to take care of our own. America first. empathy is for suckers. What people are failing to realize is that these cases are being chosen on purpose. If you think to yourself, I want dangerous gang members removed from our country and I don't care if the president denies them due process, you're falling into their trap. You are saying you don't care if the president violates the Constitution, invokes a wartime act during peacetime, and disregards court orders. The problem with that line of thinking is you're saying you don't mind that he's operating outside the law and blasting through all the checks and balances we have. You're fine with Congress no longer having any power, with the judicial branch being ignored, with the president and Elon Musk debiting $80.5 million from New York State's Citibank account because they've hacked our payment systems. When you start agreeing to these rules, you've accepted the end of democracy. You're co-signing. It's a matter of time before they make a decision you don't like and you find you have no recourse. Do you really want an executive branch that will withdraw funds from any state bank account at any time it sees fit? What if a state has a policy the president doesn't like? We've all seen his 2 a.m. rants on social media. What if he gets pissed at a governor and decides to exact revenge? What if Musk wants Starlink everywhere and some states want to use different companies to avoid a monopoly? They're choosing all these test cases carefully. They're picking the ones they feel sure their supporters won't mind. Mahmoud Khalil, for example. He came here on a student visa and went to my alma mater, Columbia University. Now he's a legal permanent resident with a green card, married to an American citizen, Noor Abdallah, who happens to be 8 months pregnant with their first child. She grew up in the Midwest. Last week, as they came home from dinner, 2 agents from the Department of Homeland Security followed them into their building, handcuffed him, and dragged him away from his wife. They never showed a warrant. They just pushed him into the back of a car, took him to New Jersey, and then flew him to a detention center in Louisiana with no charges brought and no evidence of any illegal activity offered. He was born in a Palestinian refugee camp in Syria. His parents are Palestinian, and later his family was forced into Lebanon. When the protests began at Columbia University last year, Khalil was chosen as the lead negotiator between student protesters and Columbia University administrators. Khalil is known for his calm nature. Marco Rubio, at the behest of the president, is seeking to revoke Khalil's green card and deport him. Green card holders can be deported if they are deemed to pose a threat to national security. But mediating for students, participating in protests, and voicing dissent are certainly not activities that come anywhere near that bar. If we've gotten to the point where people can be deported for expressing views the administration doesn't like, we are in very dangerous territory. Funny side note, Marco Rubio's paternal grandfather fled communist Cuba in 1962 and came to the United States without a visa. He was detained as an undocumented immigrant, and immigration judge ordered that he be deported, but immigration officials reversed the decision later that day and he was allowed to stay. JFK was in the White House then. Thinking the woke libs with their woke tears are the problem is how you'll find yourself driving down the streets of our country one day, feeling sad in your soul about the questions you didn't ask, the battles you didn't fight, and the warnings you didn't heed because you thought you were getting something good when what you were really getting was something dark and terrible. There are some battles you don't fight as quickly as you should, but you recover. You get in the game eventually. You get bloodier than you would have if you'd grabbed your sword sooner, but you manage to fight the good fight and get the job done. You get through it and you heal, and you learn something important. A younger version of you joins an older version of you to drive your daughter to a date, hoping she knows how fucking precious she is, feeling pretty positive she does because you've made sure of it. You trust that your pain has been worthwhile. This isn't one of those battles. This is the kind where you need to recognize the danger before it's too late, and the country you loved is a thing you tell your grandkids about. Fifth Amendment. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces, or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So, breaking the fifth. That's the Fifth Amendment there at the end. All those things have been on my mind for the last few days. Obviously, I'm always interested in the microcosm and the macrocosm. And, I started thinking about this relationship and moving out here. And I'll talk about that first because I do think that that's a fascinating thing when you find yourself in a place and, it brings you back, right? That experience of just being somewhere and suddenly, like a feeling overcomes you. And that really is what happened when I got off at Fairfax. And it's not like I haven't been there at all. It's just, I don't know, there was just something about it. I really felt not just a sadness, but I felt a real depression just being in that area and driving along that road. It really kind of overcame me and reminded me of that time in my life. And sometimes people experience that, when they go back home or when they, a certain smell is on the air, somebody's wearing a perfume or a cologne, it's that kind of feeling. And that is what happened. And also just being at the Grove and being in that parking lot, it really brought back that whole time in my life and that sadness. And maybe you have had that experience in your life and relationships. I've had it more than once, sadly. It's not the only time in my life that I have been in love with someone and have had to end it. Because if I didn't end it, I realized I'm going to be done in by this thing. I'm not going to survive. And it's one of the most painful experiences because it's not like you've reached this place where okay, we've grown apart and I don't have feelings for this person anymore. It's not that. It's like you really do love them and you would do just about anything to make it work, but they're not making that possible. And sometimes it's if you love an addict, I went through this with my mother. I think that's one of the reasons that I've talked about the ways that we often repeat these patterns, right? The repetition compulsion and this desire to gain mastery over situations we could not gain mastery over as children. And a lot of people do that when they get out in the world and become young adults and then older, they're like trying to heal that original wound, that childhood wound in their current relationship. And they think if I could just get the happy ending in this situation with this person, then I'll feel lovable, or it'll somehow make that, that pain, it'll make things better. And it never works because if you are drawn towards someone because there's a dynamic there that you're recognizing from your childhood, and it could be that it's like partly attachment styles, like you have anxious attachment and you're drawn toward people who have like avoidant attachment style, you're just going to play that whole thing out again and kind of like compound your pain, right? And in yoga, we call them samskaras. Like there are these grooves that you joined action, right? You're repeating the same thing again and again. Or like Albert Einstein, doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different outcome. It's the definition of insanity. Carl Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. So there's a lot of different schools of thought recognize the same pattern. Pleasure principle was Freud. He was the person who was noticing that the repetition compulsion overcame won out when people had a choice between like pursuing pleasure or repeating old patterns in an attempt to like gain mastery over them. They were going to repeat the old pattern. So, through many schools of thought and psychology, you find the same thing. And eventually, most of us, you get to a place where you recognize the pattern and you say, I can't keep doing this. This is not going to lead me to healthy, fulfilling, loving relationships. So I got to take a look at what's happening inside of me and pick a different route, really start making different choices. And this relationship that I'm describing, when I moved to Los Angeles, it was one of those. It was not the last one, unfortunately, but it was a big one. I really did take a big hiatus and do a lot of soul searching and I think some really deep healing, and understood myself to a much greater degree, and certainly made different mistakes moving forward. I didn't make the same mistakes. I learned how to speak up if something didn't feel right, and it was much easier for me to have those difficult conversations, to ask questions if something felt off, to advocate for myself. It wasn't easy, but it was easier. So but it is a painful thing to go through when you deeply love somebody and you just have no option but to save yourself. Sometimes people find themselves in that situation in a marriage with children, and that is incredibly devastating as well. It's a very heartbreaking situation to be in. So, life is full of complications and things that you don't always plan for, and you sort of have to figure out as you go. And sometimes it really is heartbreaking. And the choices in front of you, there is no pain-free option. So you're trying to figure out, okay, what pain is the pain that's going to help me grow and open versus the pain that's going to poison me, and that's rough. So it's not easy, but sometimes that's the situation that we find ourselves in. And so it's reflecting on all of that. And of course, there's some also really, interesting like layers there of being in a car, having this feeling of this like younger version of myself kind of join me at the steering wheel. My daughter's in the passenger seat, and people tell us all the time, like, we look very, very much alike. And, it's just it was an intense experience driving her to a date and hoping that I have done enough to instill in her, a real sense of her own worth, which I feel confident that she has. She's a lot smarter than I was at 15, I'll tell you, and just a lot more self-aware. And she's a fiery thing. So I don't worry about her too much. But, it's still intense. It's like it's the world that we're living in right now. And all these, government websites just like deleting women's accomplishments and, the SAVE Act and so many of these things that we're watching happen right now are devastating. As the mother of a daughter in this country at the moment, and a son, I worry about both of my children and all of our children. And in all reality, there's no such thing as other people's children. So all of those things were very much on my mind. And, maybe I should pause and say that for a second. I am someone just in the sort of like really, like 30,000 feet up view. I look at things and feel like we are just getting so many things wrong as human beings. And, to me, it's like, this is one planet. We're one people on one planet. And each one of us, we get here, maybe we get 80 to 100 years, if we're lucky. And to think that any of this belongs to us, that we can take ownership over it, is to me absurd, right? It's like, this is this is a gift. We get to be here. The planet is not ours. We don't own this. It's not ours to sell off or to divide up or, to decide this is my piece of land. This is like, doesn't belong to us. We're just guests here. And so I know that in this day and age, what I'm saying probably sounds like completely radical to a lot of people or naive, but that's genuinely what I believe. We show up on a planet that has been here long before we arrived, and it will be here long after we go. And it is foolishness to think, that any of it belongs to us or that we should be fighting wars and killing each other over territory or resources or anything else, because we're taking none of this with us. And if we were smarter and more evolved, we'd be sharing resources and we would be kind to one another. But that is certainly not where we are. So, anywhere that I see in the world where children are dying because the adults around them are violent, I am devastated. I am heartbroken. I do not reserve my heartbreak for only some people. It's just not, I've been, I don't know. I think I've always felt like that. I was going to say I've been practicing yoga and meditation for 34 years, but to be honest, I think I have always felt that way. Even as a little kid, just my heart would go out to anyone, anytime I saw anybody suffering. It's just, it's how it is. So yeah, that's my hot take on everything. When I look at what is happening in this country right now, obviously I'm beside myself, because one of the other things is, for whatever reason, I've always been just a bit of like a history buff. I absolutely love the Constitution. I'm a little bit of a geek with that. I really, I have said this before, probably say it again, but I don't feel, I'm not at all confused. America has never lived up to who we've said we are, not in the Declaration of Independence, not in the Constitution. The founding fathers were right. They were white men writing about white men. All men are created equal. All white men are created equal is what they meant. And so anything else has been a fight to get any other segment of the population recognized in the Constitution as having equal rights. It's been a fight all the way from the beginning of this country. And we took this country from the people who were here before we arrived. So it's like, that's where I'm coming from. And we don't own it anyway. I mean, so there's just, yeah, I'm probably someone who looks at this whole thing differently than a lot of people, and that's fine. But for sure, looking at what we're seeing right now, I at least have always felt like, okay, there's a framework to be trying here to create a more perfect union, to pull more people, into the safety net, to bring more people under those protections, and to try to make something a lot more beautiful and fair than what it is that we have been seeing, a lot more compassionate. And not just in this country, like everywhere. Ideally, like for me, that's the whole point, is to try to figure out what we can do to be making the world at large a more peaceful place and a more compassionate place. So yeah, my heart is fully broken. What's happening here in this country right now, I just beside myself, because I feel like we are going in absolutely the reverse direction here. And we have people who are getting rid of our democracy. Any hope that we have of trying to make things better for people is just every day. It's like there's less and less, power for us to do any of that. And that's what I was, that's sort of what was occurring to me when I was sitting there in the parking lot, is that I got that relationship that I was thinking about, this guy, one of the things that he said to me, and he was one of these people that, you would have something would happen. And when I was able to say, hey, this thing really like hurt my feelings, or it was confusing, or it was upsetting, when I was able to say something, he would mirror it. I think he had done some of that work. So he would say, oh, I understand. Like, I hear what you're saying. You're saying that was really hard for you. I understand why that would have been like that. I'm really, I could see why I would have felt the same way. And I would think to myself, wow, like, I'm so like glad I was able to say something. He really heard me. He understood. And then the next time the exact same thing would happen again. So it was just like, words. And so I didn't realize that when he was saying this, sort of in the beginning of our relationship, I've never been able to really be happy in a relationship because I always feel like I'm having to like edit myself, or I can't really be, I tend to be really outrageous, or I tend to say things and do things. And like, most people just they can't deal with it. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to be the person that can deal with it. And I didn't know what I was signing up for. But then as I got into it and I started to see there were things that were really, really painful. And some of them he absolutely hid from me very intentionally. And that stuff, a lot of things came out after it was over, after the cheese incident at Whole Foods, which is when I ended things. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I linked an older essay in this week's essay. He was a shoplifter, which I found out one day, very shockingly. And so that was the end. Like the day that happened I ended it instantly. I was just like, well, I can't do that. And he was not willing to get help, or, he just wasn't willing to get any help. And he liked that about himself. He liked the dichotomy of being a yoga teacher who also was a shoplifter. And so, I was not, the way that I took it at the time was I was not enough, and our relationship was not enough, but really I was not enough reason for him to want to try or to want to get help. It was incredibly painful. And he left me. And went back to New York, and I was out here. And so, and then more things, as I said, came to light that were like incredibly dark, just really painful, dark stuff. And things that I realized like, there was not any hope. And also like, wow, like how could I have been with someone and not realize that, and not seen signs, and not known, and like, it really did a number on my own ability to feel like I could trust myself. So a lot of that stuff. So sometimes like, and that, I think those dots started to connect for me when I was sitting in the parking lot. Like sometimes you don't realize you're being tested because you're distracted by a whole bunch of other things. And I really do think that's what's happening here. And I've had some conversations online with some of the president's supporters, and that's why I understand what they're saying and what they're thinking when you start talking about, like Tren de Aragua. They're like, well, I don't want gang members in this country. I'm glad they got rid of them and put them on planes and defied the judge. And I don't care if they were denied due process. And you're like, well, wait a second. Like, who even knows if they were all members of this gang, because they weren't. This case was like that. Nobody was brought before a judge. No evidence was presented. They were just taken and put on a plane, and the judge said, no, wait a second, you got to turn that plane around. And it was like, no, that was defied, and they were sent to El Salvador, and that's it. They're gone, and there's I don't care. I don't want that, in our country. It's like, but you should care, because you don't know. They weren't given due process, so you're just taking someone's word that all of those men on that, you're just taking this administration's word that they were all part of this gang and you're not asking for any proof or evidence at all. That's terrifying. You know, Mahmoud Khalil, you know, it's like whatever your feelings are about the protests on Columbia University campus, on Barnard campus, whatever your feelings are, this man has a green card and they have not presented any evidence, any proof of anything that would indicate he is a threat to national security. They've just pulled him away from his 8 months pregnant wife and pushed him into the back of a car and taken him away to New Jersey and then flown him to Louisiana, and they're holding him in a detention center and they want to revoke his green card and deport him. Denied due process, you know. And they're using the president is using the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, you know, which is a wartime act during peacetime. And the green card issue, the Secretary of State can deport someone if their presence could have a, quote, potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequence for the United States, unquote. But, you know, somebody mediating on a college campus between student protesters and college administrators and voicing dissent, you know, like that's not somebody who's posing a potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences. You know, this is unprecedented. But if this is what they're going to get away with, we're in time where everybody should be, no matter what your feelings are, everyone should be not okay with that, you know? And that is the part, like, people are getting distracted by their feelings and their emotions about the particular cases and losing sight of the law. They're losing sight of the law, and that is not an accident. They have intentionally chosen cases that they know everyone is inflamed. Their supporters have very serious feelings, and that's why they've picked these cases to test, because they're hoping that only half the people are going to be upset and vocal. And, you know, if it's not the people that voted for this administration, then they're not really too concerned about it. And even if their supporters were upset about it, some of them are, they're not too worried about it, because they don't care about the judiciary, and they don't care about the Congress. And they've already shown that. And that's one of the reasons that it is so, shocking and terrifying here, because, like, even these senators who are not fighting back, it's hard to imagine what they're thinking, because essentially what's happened here, and the money, the $80.5 million that was debited from New York State's Citibank account, that is a state account. Congress appropriated those funds for New York State, and the president may not impound funds that have been appropriated by Congress. Okay? The Constitution gives Congress power of the purse strings. So you have a president and Elon Musk, okay, who's not elected, violating the Constitution. The way they were able to claw back that money is that Elon Musk's team of kids, and they're 18 to 24-year-old kids, are writing code on our payment systems. He went in front of a judge and said they weren't. He said they had read-only access. Read-only access does not enable you to withdraw funds. These people are writing code, and they took $80.5 million back from New York State's bank account. So if you are signing off on that, what you are saying is you're okay with a dictatorship, an oligarchy, you're okay with that because we don't have a Congress that's in control anymore. We don't have a judiciary. We no longer have three branches that are in effect. We only have the executive branch. That's not a democracy anymore. That's a dictatorship. That's a CEO. That's one person calling the shots. Why do you want to sign off on that is my question. Because, the minute you give up these checks and balances that we have had here, again, imperfect union, a lot of work needed to be done to bring a whole lot of people, into under that safety net, no doubt. But if you get rid of the three branches and the checks and balances, forget it. You've got these people calling the shots about everything. A man who, loses his mind at 2 a.m. and starts tweeting, it's just like this is not it, folks. And another guy there who's calling Social Security the biggest Ponzi scheme he's ever seen and saying empathy is a weakness. Like, these are not the people that you want to just be deciding which state bank accounts are going to be wiped out whenever they feel like it. It's a tremendous amount of power. Starlink, you want to give away all your power and set these people up to make all the decisions about everything. By the time they make a decision you don't like, you'll have no recourse whatsoever to do anything about it. That's not a democracy. And nobody should be signing off on that. Things are happening every day that really ought to be scaring everybody here. And unfortunately, they've done such a fabulous job of dividing us that there are a lot of people, and I've been trying so hard to share information in just an unemotional way, like, here, please read this. Please think about this. Please take a look at this. Because, if his supporters keep screaming at us, woke libs, woke tears, they win. They win. Like, all of us need to get together here somehow or another. We don't have to, we don't have to agree about everything, but like, we should at least be able to agree that we do not want to lose our democracy. And that's where we are right now. And that's, it's very hard to not have that on my mind all the time, because I am so worried for so many people. As much as we've never lived up to who we have said we are, we've never been further. It's hard to imagine us further away from who we've said we are than we are right now. And it's like right now, all these court cases, like USAID, like they were saying what Musk did was unconstitutional and not okay. And it's like, reinstate a whole bunch of USAID workers. I'm going to wait to see if they listen to that court order. They didn't listen to the judge who said those planes needed to be turned around. They just don't care. Y'all have given people power here who do not care about the rule of law. They don't care. So we are in a really, really terrifying point in time here, and it's made even more so because I just really wish we could come together on this before it's so far gone that there's no hope. People are being detained. Canadians are bemeing detained, and we've gotten to a real real scary point in time here. And so that's it for this week. I'm going to get my other teenager, and spring break time for those of us with college age kids, and, soak up the joy where and when you can find it. Love your people, hug your people, try to take care of yourself, do whatever you can do, whatever it is for you. I've been saying this, I think, every week, but 4-7-8 breathing. If you're having moments of overwhelm, try to slow down your breathing. Just that alone will help reset your nervous system. If you can do 4-7-8 breathing and you can do kind of 60 in a row, that'll reset your nervous system. You can do that while you're driving. You can do that while you're whatever, unloading your dishwasher, doing laundry, just to kind of keep that one right in your back pocket. See if you can move your body some way or another, even chair yoga. If you're stuck at home, I understand, just see if you can get yourself breathing, breathe deeply. Meditation, maybe that'll work for some people. I know it doesn't work for everybody. Just see if you can get some sun on your face. It's try to take care of yourself. Call a friend, FaceTime if you can't get out, just try to take care of yourself. It does matter. And, make your art. If you're somebody who writes or you paint or you write poetry or you make your art, try to take your heartache and make something beautiful with it and hang in there. And if you need support, you know where to find me. Okay. I'm sending you lots of love. Till next time.